Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. As the cold wind bites and the world falls silent beneath the weight of winter, tonight we delve into three disturbing true winter horror stories that prove the season of snow can hide far darker things than we imagine. These are not tales of folklore but chilling accounts whispered through time, told by those who barely escaped and left behind by those who never returned. Snow may blanket the earth, but in its stillness, it conceals footsteps, both human and inhuman, waiting to be traced. These tales are filled with isolation, dread, and inexplicable encounters that occurred far from the warmth of civilization. As you listen, remember, in winter, screams don't echo. They disappear into the wind. The first story takes us deep into rural Minnesota, where a young man named Daniel accepted a winter caretaker job at an abandoned lodge nestled near a frozen lake. The locals warned him that the lodge had been closed for years after a family vanished one Christmas Eve without a trace. But Daniel, desperate for solitude and money, brushed off the warnings as superstition. The lodge was eerily untouched. Dining plates still set at the long oak table, snow boots lined by the door, and Christmas decorations frozen in time. At first, he found comfort in the quiet, shoveling snow and keeping the fireplace alive. But on the third night, he began hearing something odd. Footsteps crunching in the snow outside at exactly 3 a.m. Each night, the footsteps got closer, circling the building. He checked every window but saw nothing. No footprints, no shadows, only the endless white. Inside the lodge, strange changes began to occur. One morning, he found the front door slightly ajar. Snow drifted across the floor. On the windowsill sat a cracked ornament with a name written on it in faded ink. Clara. Daniel had never touched the decorations. His unease grew when he noticed the dining table. Plates had shifted, forks repositioned, as though someone had been silently sitting there. On the sixth night, the footsteps stopped, but the silence felt heavier, suffocating. At 3 a.m., he was awakened not by sound, but by a deep, cold presence in the hallway. When he stepped out of his room, he saw them, wet footprints, small and bare, leading to the dining room. In the dim moonlight, he saw the table fully set, every chair filled with shadowy silhouettes, motionless. Their heads slowly turned toward him. He ran, but as he reached the front door, he heard a soft voice behind him, a whisper drifting through the cold. We waited. Daniel was found days later by a search team, wandering aimlessly through the forest without his coat, frostbitten and delirious. He never returned to the lodge. To this day, he refuses to speak of what he saw inside. Locals say the family who vanished had a daughter named Clara. No one has occupied the lodge since, and every winter, searchers report seeing faint lights flickering in the windows, like candles at a dinner that never ends. The second story occurred in northern Canada, where three college friends, Emma, Lucas, and Ben, set out on a winter road trip to photograph the aurora borealis. They rented a remote cabin in the Yukon, miles from any town. On their second night, a blizzard rolled in. The cabin's radio warned of dangerous conditions, urging everyone indoors. But something else slipped through the storm, something far older. Around midnight, Lucas noticed movement outside, a figure standing at the tree line, pale and motionless. He assumed it was another traveler caught in the storm. But when they opened the door to call out, the figure vanished, leaving no tracks in the deep snow. That night, strange knocks echoed through the walls, light at first, then pounding, circling the cabin in impossible patterns. The three friends tried to ignore it, huddled around the fireplace. But at 2 a.m., Emma gasped. There were handprints on the frosted windows, 5 fingers pressed against the glass, long and thin, the skin beneath translucent. They didn't match any human shape. Lucas, in a panic, urged everyone to stay still. Then came the voice. A soft, brittle whisper slipped through the walls, mimicking Emma's mother, calling her name. Emma broke and ran to the window, convinced someone needed help. Lucas and Ben pulled her back, but when she turned, her eyes were glassy, unfocused, like something had almost drawn her out. The power went out. In the blackness, the whispering returned, now right behind them. Not a voice, but breathing, wet and ragged. Something brushed Ben's coat. They didn't sleep. By morning, the storm had eased. They fled without packing. Miles down the road, they stopped at a ranger station. The ranger, pale and weary, told them, "You're lucky. It follows those who answer it. Next time, don't look at it. Don't speak to it. Don't think it's human." The ranger refused to say more. Every winter since, locals warned travelers of an old spirit known to mimic the dying, luring souls into the snow. They call it the hollow caller. The third and final story comes from a remote Siberian village where an elderly woman named Clara lived alone after her husband's death. She was known as kind but secretive, often speaking of voices in the wind during heavy snowfall. One brutal January, the village experienced a blizzard so violent that all power was lost. Villagers stayed indoors, boarding windows and praying it would pass. But Clara claimed something else traveled with the storm, something that whispered from the forest. On the fourth night of the blizzard, her neighbor, a man named Victor, noticed a dim lantern flickering near the tree line behind her home. He thought she was lost in the storm and gathered others to search. But when they reached her door, it stood wide open. Fresh snow had drifted inside, yet no footprints led out. Inside, the fire still burned. A pot of tea steamed on the table. But Clara was gone. In her rocking chair lay a note written in shaky script. "It is calling. I must return what is owed." No one knew what that meant. The villagers searched for hours, no tracks, no signs, only wind. Days later, when the blizzard finally lifted, something strange was found at the edge of the forest. A small bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside was a child's shoe, nearly a century old. Clara had no children. Months passed. One evening, a young villager heard knocking at his window. When he looked outside, he saw Clara standing in the snow, motionless, eyes black as coal. Before he could react, she turned and vanished into the dark. Elders whispered of ancient debts, of lost children taken by the winter spirits long ago, and those who made pacts to bring them back. Each winter, before the first blizzard, villagers now leave offerings, old toys, bread, candles at the forest's edge. No one speaks Clara's name aloud. Winter is a season of silence, but these stories remind us that silence is not always empty. Footsteps can follow without prints. Voices can speak without breath. And those lost to the cold do not always stay buried beneath the snow. If you ever find yourself alone in a winter night and hear a knock at your door or a whisper in the wind, do not answer. Some calls are not meant for the living. Stay warm, stay inside, and pray that whatever walks the frozen roads passes you by. For in winter's deepest cold, the dead do not sleep. They wander.